Introducing the Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index, the WCCPI, constructed by Native Angelino Real Estate through our research arm, Native Angelino Research. It's the first published price index for the Wilshire Corridor, this stretch of Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles 90024. It took quite a while to put it together. We're proud of it, and we will be updating it regularly. The Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index, the WCCPI, tracks the Wilshire Corridor high-rise condominium market along the 1.2-mile stretch of Wilshire Boulevard in 90024. It applies the BMN method, the Bailey-Muth-Nourse repeat sales regression model, with Case-Shiller second pass variance weighting. So for any statistician, there's the language. It's the same methodology that the S&P Cotality Case-Shiller indices use nationally. Every data point compares a unit to its own prior sale, so the index captures real appreciation, which we can then adjust proprietarily. So we have 26 years indexed to Q1 of 2000 and more than 3,000 MLS transactions and more than 1,400 unit pairs growing every quarter. So that's the basis of the Native Angelino Real Estate Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index. So the WCCPI, in conjunction with our pages on HOA dues, our building directory, and further research to come out of Native Angelino Research, we hope to prove to you that we have the deepest, most concise, accurate, and most importantly, useful information for buyers, sellers, owners, investors along the Wilshire-Westwood Scenic Corridor. I'm Tom Levine, Native Angelino Real Estate. This is the launch of the Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index. It's the first index of its kind to measure pricing specifically for the 1.2-mile stretch that's actually the Wilshire Corridor. So the first truly constructed, indexed, published view of the Park Avenue of Los Angeles. Now, what do we mean by this, the Wilshire Corridor Price Index? Well, we've used the same methodology as Case-Shiller uses, whereby we take data over the last 26 years. So we indexed to the year 2000 and looked at a representative 35 buildings across this 1.2-mile stretch to look at price changes versus not only Case-Shiller, but also the Zillow indices. And why did we do this? Well, when you compare pricing on housing and you use larger metrics, like let's say we use the Zillow West Side Index or we use the Case-Shiller Los Angeles Condo Index, well, it's not really relevant for an actual buyer or seller in a limited geographic area like the condo corridor we're talking about here. Think about it. If you have in Los Angeles a brand new condominium community that opened up in an area of Los Angeles, let's say 3 years ago, that hadn't been fully developed, condos are initially sold, and then in the next 3 years, you have build up around it. So valuation goes up dramatically. But is that really competitive and a great comp for a building that's an A building on the Wilshire Corridor that's been around for 25 years, that has the services, the doorman, all the things that you look for in this very specialized neighborhood that stretches from Beverly Hills to Westwood, or more specifically, from the edge of the Los Angeles Country Club to almost all the way to Westwood Boulevard. Not quite all the way. So this is the first published index of the Wilshire Corridor. This is the Wilshire Corridor Price Index, the first mathematically sound, statistically sound price index of the Wilshire Corridor in Los Angeles 90024. So what does that mean? It means along the Park Avenue of Los Angeles, the 1.2-mile stretch of primarily condominium towers, we've hand-selected 35 of the towers, and we've looked at data over the last 26 years. So we indexed to the year 2000 and used the same methodology as is used by Case-Shiller and by Zillow and the others, but with a much better approach for the local buyer or seller of a condo in the high-rise along the Wilshire Corridor itself. So what do we mean by that exactly? The Wilshire Corridor Price Index exists specifically to fill the gap that the typical numbers do not. You can use your own sources, you can speak with any broker or agent, and they can give you the typical price per square foot and the comps across the region in the area. That's fine. But this is very specific. This is the unique market, the Park Avenue of Los Angeles, where we're not looking at citywide averages to compare building to building. Yes, we do benchmark against the Zillow index and the Case-Shiller index, but this is altogether different. We're isolating the Wilshire-Westwood Scenic Corridor, that's the actual name of this 1.2 mile stretch along the Wilshire Corridor. So why is this important? I can give you data on a particular unit in a particular building across the last 26 years. So even if a particular unit you're looking at hasn't been purchased or sold in the last 26 years, I can get you real close, accurate data based on the building, the side of the building, the exposure, the floor plan, whatever it might be, the HOA dues, all of this. So again, why is it important? Because this is a very specific local indice that can get you in-depth knowledge and information to make informed decisions, whether you're buying or selling. So let me explain to you how the Wilshire Corridor Price Index is actually constructed. We use something called the repeat sales method. This is the same method that the S&P Cotality Case-Shiller Index uses. And without going into all the details, what it essentially does is say, take repeat sales of the same unit across at least 2 transactions so we can look at appreciation of that unit specifically. Now, we have to factor things in like has it been upgraded and some other things, but again, it's a very hardcore way to get granular data that the other indices don't capture. So the WCCPI, as we call it, the Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index, uses the same recognized methods as the Case-Shiller and Zillow in terms of statistical framework, which means it's verifiable. And although we don't publish all of the data, it's proprietary, we can show enough of the data and enough history so that a statistician could look at it and say, all right, the methodology here is correct, although they won't know the exact method by which we adjust for building and changes and on-the-ground knowledge that we've acquired at Native Angelino Real Estate after having done this for so long. When we talk about putting together a frame of reference, or in this case, an index or indice, we need a frame of reference. So we talk about being indexed to a point in time. In this case, this index, the WCCPI, is indexed to Q1 of the year 2000. And we'll update it as we get into Q2 of 2026 and onwards when we have that data. But the important thing is that we have a frame of reference that's consistent, and the number of data points within that data set increases over time naturally as units are bought and sold across the Wilshire Corridor. So what Native Angelino Research has done has been able to show how the corridor itself performed versus the, call it Westwood Beverly Hills area, which is what Zillow points at. Or if you look at the Case-Shiller index, they look at greater Los Angeles. And even at Los Angeles City, if you break it down to there, we can tell you how this neighborhood in particular has performed against the city. And then we can begin to look at whether it's outperformed or underperformed, and then look at why specific buildings have more appreciation potential than others, why certain units have more appreciation potential than others, or maybe you already own the unit, and as much as you love living there, I can show you statistically that you've made most of the money you're going to make in it versus everything else. So I can say, look, you've captured 98% of the upside if it's more than just a place to live for you, but if there's an investment piece to it, it might make sense to sell this condo. And even if you have to move across the street or into another floor in the building, or maybe to another neighborhood, you've got greater price appreciation, meaning greater return on investment by making that change. So that's the idea behind the index, to have a framework, a baseline that we can go for the neighborhood specifically, and then as granular as we need to go to complete the research. So now let's talk about how the Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index has performed versus the two benchmarks we've been speaking of today, the Case-Shiller Index and the Zillow Index. Surprisingly, for most of the period, and I'm going to talk about in this case, since the crash of the 2006 to 2010 period, the Wilshire Corridor has underperformed slightly. And I'm not going to give the exact numbers because in raw terms, it's not that big a difference, but it is significant when we dig into the details. And I don't want to quote the exact numbers here. I want you to look at the webpage, Native Angelino Research, Wilshire Corridor Price Index, and you can see the current updates, which are going to be updated at least every 3 months at the end of every quarter. So at Native Angelino Research, when we built the Condo Price Index, we looked at quarter to quarter, across the city, across the region, across the corridor, sales data going back 26 years. And what we found is the corridor itself is much more volatile in certain quarters than the broader city. And that makes sense. It's a smaller universe, a contained universe, an important universe of thousands of condominiums along Wilshire Boulevard, but more volatile. And we can get into talking about one-on-one. Is that because of new construction coming along the corridor? At the eastern edge of the Los Angeles Country Club, you have the historic 2 new towers that are being built. You have the Waldorf that's been built. In Century City, which is 1.5 miles away, you have new construction, I believe 3-4 buildings in the last 5 years. There are plans along Beverly Hills major boulevards to add high-rise towers like never before. And then we'll get into, in the next video, talking about transit-oriented communities. In other words, what's the impact of the subway line coming into Beverly Hills? Right? So if the stop is at, the next to open is going to be at Cannon Drive, it's approximately 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles from the corridor here. The last mile, Uber, you can walk, whatever it might be. It changes the entire dynamic of the neighborhood. So that's for the next round. And then finally, to recap, the Wilshire Corridor Condo Price Index, constructed by Native Angelino Real Estate, describes the corridor, not the buildings. We have separate pages and analysis of HOA dues, building level analysis. So we can go across the corridor, across buildings by floor, by exposure, and give you real data over 26 years, updated quarterly, of how this neighborhood acts, what it's susceptible to in terms of new construction, whether it makes sense to buy or sell at this point in time, or maybe it's not a pure investment decision, it's a lifestyle decision. So let's have a framework to begin from so I can help guide benchmarking this 1.2 mile corridor to help you make rational, informed decisions. So that's what we strive for with Native Angelino Research, again, published by Native Angelino Real Estate. Data for informed, rational decisions in your buy or sell transaction, or even frankly, if you just want an analysis of what we think your property is worth, we'll provide a broker price opinion, and feel free to reach out and talk to us about that consulting assignment as well. I'm Tom Levine, Native Angelino Real Estate.